What's up, Outliers? Happy Wednesday. It's a little bit of a cloudy day here in San Diego, but we are getting by just fine. As you can see, NVIDIA is actually coming up with its earnings for the cycle right now, and so far, it appears like earnings is going well. The funny thing about this is we were actually very recently talking about NVIDIA and their earnings. I'm seeing if I can find the video to show you all, because the timing of it is funny. We looked at it, I think, yesterday, and I think we also looked at it on Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. So the goal for the stream today, actually, here it is to take a look at NVIDIA. And then it's to take a look at two other things. Tesla, the volatility in there has caught my eye, and then GameStop, because they just recently confirmed their earnings. And I think the move in volatility in there is quite interesting. So here's the clip. I don't know if I can get copyrighted on my own thing. That would actually be something YouTube probably would do. It would be kind of funny. So if we get disconnected, that's why. But I want to play at least part of this. I don't even know what I said, by the way. A lot of times people ask me like, oh, what stream or what video did you talk about blank? I have no idea, dog. I make so many videos, it would be impossible for me to discreetly know in each spot. So we're literally about to be watching this together and figuring out what the hell I said. I could be completely wrong. I don't think so, based on what I think I saw yesterday, but we are about to find out. So let's take a look. Man, the sun was hitting different yesterday, wasn't it? All right, so let's see. The options activity. So this is looking at NVIDIA, and again, this was yesterday for NVIDIA. There was a couple things that really stuck out to me. Pretty bullish leaning. Now, if we take a look to see what it looks like in the expiration cycle itself, and obviously we care about this upcoming cycle, take a look at the call premium. Take a look at the put premium. 63 mil against 209 mil. A couple notes. The times that you see this kind of skew tend to be, especially in a name like NVIDIA. A name like NVIDIA is broadly held by a ton of different portfolios, specifically to the long side, right? They're just holding the stock. Now, most of the time when somebody's holding the stock, they're playing long-term price appreciation, but sometimes you don't want to deal with near-term price shocks. So more often than not, you will see those kinds of holders buying puts. It's a cost of doing business. It's a cost to take some risk off through the earnings release. The fact that you're seeing this much directional speculative volume in a large cap stock that typically exhibits the opposite behavior is a pretty strong indicator. Now, I gotta say, I agree with that. I agree with what that guy just said. And I was evaluating as if I was evaluating anybody else talking. That was actually kind of funny. But that's exactly correct. It sounds like something I would say. So the funny thing is, and the reason why I'm sharing that with you is because so far, take a look at what's happening in NVIDIA. They're right now trading at 141, where they closed at 134. This is one of those instances where it's always a crapshoot. The last thing I want somebody to ever take away from a clip like that is like, oh, Eric knew this was going to happen. The fuck I did. I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea what I'm going to have for dinner, let alone what a stock is going to do. I have no idea, but I'm the worst guy to have an idea. But what I can do is look for clues on probabilistic outcomes and make a guess. That's effectively what that is. That's not me knowing what's going to happen? Nobody knows. However, I can look at different things, different analytical inputs, and then I can arrive at something that's like, it seems like X scenario is more probable than Y scenario. And then my job as a degenerate trader is to trade my half-baked idea. That's effectively what this game is. Now, joking aside, the main thing that I really do want to drive home from that is that, seriously, nobody knows. So whenever you get people that like make a call and then they go back and they say like, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen. Like, fuck that person. It's bullshit. They don't know. Nobody knows. That doesn't mean that you can't say, I think X is more likely than Y, and it's a tradable event for whatever reason, right? There's a fine difference between those. So when I look at this coming earnings release, this is what I expected to see. This is not anything that I knew to be the case. And a big part of that absolutely comes down to literally that exact point. And it really is worth reiterating. So it's like, it's very pertinent here. Most of the time when big, large cap stocks that are widely held go through an earnings cycle, they more often than not will see put side hedging. And it's simply because those people are not looking to speculate on direction through earnings. They just don't want to have a ton of risk through earnings. So to see that much directional positioning is quite telling, among other things. That was just a clip of the pro stream that we did yesterday, where we go in a little bit more in detail on stuff like this. We go on and look at like the other earnings and stuff like that. None of that matters. The main thing that I thought was interesting is that the options markets did give us some ideas as to what this could look like. And so far, it does look like they're having a pretty solid earnings. Now, the other thing to pay attention to is who knows where this is going to open tomorrow. That's a whole other bag, right? So right now it's trading down at 140.84. So it's already trickling down a little bit. There's nothing that says that this can't run down more. Who knows? No idea. But anyways, let's see what they're talking about here. That's the last person I want to watch, to be honest with you. I just want to see like an overview of here. We can start with this. Business booming. We know that they reported 44 billion in revenue for its fiscal quarter. Yo, when you have companies that are out here just reporting billions over quarters, we are firmly in monopoly money. Like, this is all fake. That's an insane, like, could you imagine, like, what is a visual of that amount of money? I'm going to ask, we need a comparison. Give me a reference visual for $44 billion in $100 bills. Just visually, how many trucks it would take up. There we go. So 44 billion is 440 pallets, which is essentially an entire warehouse. That's a pretty good one. Pallets is decent. I don't know that many people would like refer to pallets, but I feel like most people know what a fucking pallet looks like. So 440 of those bastards. That's just a ton of money. Okay. Let's see. Includes chips, other components, a computing system. Yes. Revenue up 73% year over year. Market's happy. Futures are up. I actually am long futures right now. And that's literally just because my near-term expectation is that we will see this kind of bleed through. Like, I absolutely think we'll continue to see this kind of bleed through from the news. So yeah, that absolutely I think is likely to continue at least for a little bit. Now there's a breadth of data, by the way, that can analyze the frequency of reversals of big earnings beats and stuff like that. But this does look poised for post-earnings announcement drift. even though that typically doesn't impact large cap stocks quite as much anymore. Something like this, probably something to keep an eyeball on. Let's see what else, anything else sticks out to us. Okay. The data center business includes chips and other components used in AI computing system. Revenues surged 73% year over year to 39.1 billion, just below the 39.36 billion expected by analysts. So this is really interesting because this is still a slight miss technically, right? They were expecting even more aggressive metrics. So that's actually kind of interesting that it's still reacting this nicely. Darkmark says another way to help wrap our heads around the difference between million and billion is, oh, I've heard this put in time before. 1 million seconds is 11 days. 1 billion seconds is 31 years. I've heard that one before. That's a really great way. And I think that's an even better comparison than pallets. So now we need to know what 44 billion seconds is in years. Multiply that by 44. We're all dead and then some. That's much. Certified fine. What are these little crowns y'all have? What the fuck does that mean? I've not seen those before. Those are cool. Certified Finance says, why don't you sell credit spreads? That's a great question. It's not that I don't. It's that I rarely do. And it's because when we look at a vertical spread, they tend to cannibalize themselves. I mean, that's really the whole point of a vertical spread, is to decrease the total risk in the trade, both felt by the Greeks, but as part of that decreasing of risk, you are decreasing opportunity. So I think a few things, but I think there's a time and place for them. In general, it's not part of what I do. There are absolutely instances where it is part of what I do, specifically through things that are like earnings releases. And I'm trading a short strangle in tech, and tech can fly. So in stuff like that, I'll add a cap. I'll add a wing to the call side. I typically wouldn't do it on the put side. I just take the risk. So the short answer is a lot of times you give up too much to take the risk off. And our job as traders is to take risk. It's how we make money. So it's mostly for those reasons. And again, it's nothing that I would say like I don't do them. I pretty much avoid those kinds of platitudes, but I definitely rarely do them. It has to be a very specific use case for them, because otherwise you're giving up too much, at least in my opinion. It's a good question. Lauren says you can't get a copyright on your own video. That's solid. That's good to know. I'm still waiting. Fucking YouTube probably turn my shit down. Ricky says Eric can read the future. See, that's the shit that I'm talking about. I cannot. Neither can anybody else. I literally still don't even know what I'm having for dinner tonight, let alone what anything else is going to happen. It's crazy. Lauren says that she Googled how to turn it off. It was distracting her. That's kind of cool. I didn't even know that you could turn it on. If there is a way for me to force turn it on for you again, I would have done that because it's kind of fun. Ricky says, market seems like it's looking for reasons to recover. Funny how last earnings beat expectations as well, but it sold off. But very, very different. And that is a really important differentiation, because when we're talking about earnings, this is a perfect time for handy dandy Eric Original. In case you guys are interested, I'll start turning these into NFTs, because are those still a thing? Do people do NFTs still? Because these are clearly just gold drawings, and it wouldn't surprise me if somebody was like, yo, I need that on my wall. I don't blame you. I might feel that way too. So if we're talking about earnings, we have two big differences. A big part of earnings is rehashing what happened in the past. It's looking at things like sales, revenue, all these kinds of things, right? All the fundamentals of stuff. And as you can see, they are pretty damn good at forecasting what stuff is going to be, especially for highly traded names. There's way too much information continuously available that allows pretty damn good estimates to be made. So you can see that they were expected year over year to 39.36. They came in at 39.1. That's year over year. That's a long time frame to make that kind of guess. And they were damn close. So when we're talking about past effects, this is kind of just like recounting what happened. And a lot of this stuff is way more the case of as long as it's pretty close or around what we thought it should be, then it passes. If it's something, let's say, for example, that revenue fell, it didn't grow as fast as expected for some sort of thing, then all of a sudden, then that doesn't pass. That creates a problem. Now, the larger component that's more important during an earnings release, barring these kinds of big changes based off of expectations, is forward guidance. This is where we're actually getting a first look at how the company is expecting things to happen in the future, which this is net new information. This is stuff that we don't know. We can guess what forward guidance might look like, but that's way more of a crapshoot than tracking things like sales, revenue, buying of new warehouses, all that kind of stuff. So the reason why in the last earnings release, and this isn't specific to NVIDIA, this is in general, the reason why you'll see that kind of behavior is not because EPS or some sort of financial metric doesn't necessarily, scratch the itch, but a lot of it has to do with the forward guidance and what is captured in that forward guidance. And if we go back to the end of February of this year, and we think about what that forward guidance looked like, all this tariff shit was going on. Stuff that directly impacts NVIDIA is going on. And NVIDIA is absolutely super susceptible to supply chain shocks in that way. They're not like some of these other companies that have actually pivoted really heavily away from some of the primary places that would be targeted. So that's a big, big difference. And it's a good observation. It's a really good observation. But the context of those two windows is super important for us to acknowledge and understand when we're making the comparison. All right, let's see what else came out here. Net income, $19.89 billion, up 31%. They announced that new rules from the Trump administration no longer allow the chips to be exported to China. Like that kind of thing absolutely impacts stuff. Adjusted earnings, diluted, don't care. Okay, so for the current quarter, NVIDIA projected revenue $45 billion, up or down 2%. Analyst view was 45.92. It includes $8 billion in lost revenue due to the H2O ban, which again, that's going to be baked into the price. Yeah. So, I mean, overall, this looks like just a pretty solid earnings release. That's what I'm seeing. Let's see what this guy says.
By almost 4%. About 30 minutes into the conference call, Susquehanna senior analyst Chris Rowland is here to give his reaction to the results. Chris, great to have you with us. And I'm just reading through some of the comments that are coming across right now, specifically about the China market, which, of course, is a big part of NVIDIA's quarter here. The CFO saying the company is still evaluating limited options to serve the Chinese market, and losing access to the Chinese market would have material adverse impact on NVIDIA's business. How should we view, if the export controls remain in place, how should we view the China market and what it will be to NVIDIA in a couple of years?
Yeah, so I think the big revelation about Q2 is that they were planning on shipping 8 billion, probably almost twice as much as we were anticipating they would actually ship.
Yo, this guy talks
into
so
China
slow.
in the second quarter. So this was turning out to be a very large blockbuster product for them. It is
Sorry, can't do it. And there's no way for me to speed them up. I fucking hate stuff like this where I'm just trying to synthesize information. Just talk fast so I can get the information faster. That's so damn slow. Okay, so let's see anything else that sticks out to us here. Roller coaster. Yep. So literally this dude was just talking about the longer term outlook in China. Okay, so let's talk about tariffs for a second and what this is likely to look like going forward. A big part of this is trying to synthesize and war game what's happening broader and what the conversations are and why they are what they are. Without going super deep into detail on all that stuff, we can if you would like, but without diving straight into that, I think the safest assumption here is that the way tariffs have been going are likely to be the way that they will continue to go. So what that means is a lot of conversations and a lot of reconciliation about finding ways to avoid these really large tariffs on everything. And a big reason for that is because the tariffs literally negatively impact literally everyone. So because of that, there's not like some sort of massive incentive to keep them in place. So when NVIDIA is trying to forecast its future business, it does have to take that stuff into account. But again, as a betting man, which I am as a trader, I have to assume that, and it seems like the market supports this assumption, that we're going to continue seeing tariffs going the way that they've been until there's a material change, which at some point there could be. But right now, NVIDIA is back up to 141. The options market looked really actually aggressive today. And again, this is some follow-up from what we saw yesterday, but I still think it's worth talking about because this kind of positioning is noteworthy. So we saw this bullish call positioning yesterday, and then towards the close today, which is really important, you can see a bunch of the call buying activity, which is speculative positioning. And then you can see put buying activity going up. That put buying activity is mostly people hedging. They don't want to overpay. They don't want to grab the put super early because you don't need to, but you want to just cover the risk for the event itself. And this represents more so of those longer term holders of the equity that don't really want to take a bet on earnings that I've referred to previously. Then that's a completely different group than the people that are speculating to the upside that we absolutely saw come through in force. So NVIDIA earnings here looks pretty solid so far. Full expectation is that the market will like that tomorrow. Now, let's take a quick look at Tesla. And Tesla is in a little bit of a different boat here. Tesla has almost near schizophrenic positioning with options going on, and it's been absolutely insane stock to watch. So a couple notes here is where we're seeing this activity, which we'll take a look in a second, where the current OI is, but then also the way that the stock is behaving. Because just like NVIDIA, when NVIDIA first had this larger sell-off, one of my broader ideas that I shared with people is that, especially for long-term investors, this was all a gift. It really is. Because the periodicity that you're going to see companies like this at these levels going forward, in my opinion, would be low. And the reason is, especially something like NVIDIA that's going to be at the epicenter of AI adoption, they have a completely new untapped growth source that is going to literally fuel them for some time. Hold on, I just got a breaking thing for Trump. What do you say? You never know what this dude is going to say. So oh, this doesn't look like anything. Yeah, okay. Doesn't say anything. And for those that don't know, there's also the current court ruling regarding the tariffs from Trump, which I was waiting to see how long it was going to take for the courts to get involved. Let's see if we can find an article on that. Court ruling Trump tariffs. So let's see. We'll start here. Federal court Wednesday blocked the sweeping tariffs under the emergency powers law. Okay. The ruling from a 3-judge panel at the New York-based Court of International Trade came after several lawsuits arguing Trump exceeded his authority. Trump repeatedly said the tariffs would force manufacturers to bring onshore. Yeah. But for now, Trump might not have the threat of import taxes to exact. So this will be kind of interesting. The ruling amounted to a categorical rejection of legal underpinnings of some signature most controversial actions. Supreme Court will almost certainly be called upon to lend a final answer, but it casts a sharp blow, which is completely correct. Tariffs must be typically approved by Congress. Said he has the power to act to address the deficits he calls national emergency. You'll notice that they do a lot of this, BT dubs, not just Trump, any president. They'll do the national emergency thing, which just allows them to circumvent some normal processes. That's one of the cool things about just the American process in general is I actually like, again, completely disparate and detached from the tariffs, the way they're going, all that kind of shit. I just like the fact that there's another body out there that can at least step in and say, let's take another look at this. I don't know if we agree with it. I like that. I think that's a good thing. Dozen states filed suit led by Oregon, which makes sense because, I mean, especially like this here. Including wine importer Voss Selections. Owner says tariffs have major impact and company might survive. Like that's a really pertinent point, especially for companies that aren't as inflation resistant. And I know that might be like, well, tariffs, inflation, what does that have to do with stuff? I'm just talking about prices in general, just general price inflation. And there are a lot of places that don't have the same capacity to tolerate it. So yeah, I think that's a hilarious picture, by the way. I love it when you can always tell like what a news agency, when they like or don't like someone, because they'll do shit like this. So my guess is CNBC. I don't know with certainty, but my guess is CNBC, not a big fan. This is a hilarious picture. Yeah, okay. So same. So that's another thing that you're seeing baked into the futures here beyond the tech earnings, because believe it or not, NVIDIA earnings is a massive part of this. That has a huge say in what the market does. NVIDIA is such a massive company. All right, so let's get back to Tesla though. And we have a scratching thing at the door. All right. We have our news analyst. What do you have to say to the people? Okay. I don't know if you guys are catching all that. He does like to talk fast. You are getting a little bit of a sniff. What do you think of this? He seems to like it. He seems to like the mic too. Okay. So now that we got our analyst locked in, let's get back looking at Tesla. So Tesla here has had an absolutely wild move. It continues to be a crazy source of vol trading, actually, believe it or not. There's a ton to do in Tesla. And even with the moves that you see, it does continue to provide really solid risk premiums because just the overall vol in here is so high. Right now, raw vol is 71.76, which still places implied volatility percentile at 71. This is also a really, really great reminder of the difference between implied volatility percentile and implied volatility rank. If you're using implied volatility rank, that would currently lead you to believe that vol is low. Vol is objectively not low. Vol is actually quite high. So the reason for that is because the way that these two are calculated makes a big difference. And I actually have a video that discusses the difference between implied volatility percentile and rank and why they're different. But anyways, Thor, leave that alone, you freak. He literally just has to come in here and then he goes over to the door and he's like stuffing his nose under the door, snorting. The dude's a crackhead. So let's take a look at what's happening in here. Still long call volume compared to put. Let's take a look. What I'm most interested in is actually how this breaks out. And let's take a look here. So all I'm doing is eyeballing premiums, which is still very call heavy, really call heavy. And this is all the way out into 2027. So really, really call heavy, which, I mean, I dig it. Huge put build out at the 395s. And it looks like a pretty short position being built here in June. Okay. And we want here. Oh, interesting. It's actually kind of mellowing out. Overall volume is actually slowing down. Not sure I would have taken it for that. And I mean, there's still pretty large trading activity. Pretty curious. So from a general positioning standpoint right now, it looks like there's a bit of a short pocket in the near term for Tesla, but then longer term, still very, very much bullish. Still very much bullish skew is as far as I could tell. Still generally ranked on the buy side. This, I have to be honest, I don't think it matters an insane amount. I do like to pay attention to it, but yeah, I don't think that this is the end all be all. I do like to see, simply because it can give us a sense of what the market is generally expecting. But it's mixed. Near term definitely looks to be a little more bearish, and then longer term looks to be a little bit more bullish. That's what I see. If we take a look at total OI, So big expansion here. And most of the OI, I mean, the majority, as far as changes, let's take a look at total OI. Still centered in the front. So people are really playing the front end of this, which stuff like this, again, you pretty much see that all the time with more volatile names. The risk premiums in here have been insane. So this reminds me of a trade that I recently reviewed with the pro folks, good old PRTA. So this one was one, I forgot exactly when I entered, but this was just short puts. And it literally moved against me almost 40%. And despite a 40% move against me, the trade was still profitable from the change in vol. So when we look at Tesla, it still maintains really aggressive risk premiums, even though on average, we've been getting larger moves than expected. Last thing I want to take a look at here is term structure. Let's see. So there's a bit of a peak. That's kind of interesting, because this is obviously wildly low relative. 23 days. What expiration is the 8/15? Okay. Wow. That is low. That's real low. So like this inversion is abnormal. And then the tail side still heavier on the tails for the put side, but not tremendously so. Huh. Okay. Synopsis. What do we see? In general, looks like near-term downside expectation, longer-term bullish expectation. Kind of the gist. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to take a look at before I open it up to whatever you want to look at. So if there's specific stocks, questions, anything you want to talk about, please start throwing in the chat. Now is the perfect time to start throwing that stuff in. But I want to talk about this, two things. So for GameStop, we saw a couple really interesting things that, as always, I think GameStop is a great general learning vector for markets. And it is everything to do with the way that GameStop behaves, some of what it shows us, and some of the anomalies that it also exhibits. So one of the things that I'm noticing here is it obviously recently announced its conclusion of, what was it, 500 million? So it did not use the total capital it had allocated yet to purchase Bitcoin, but it is absolutely building out its Bitcoin position. Now, this big of a sell-off is a little bit heavy, but it does seem like the pricing for the Bitcoin transactions doesn't really look ideal. So here you go. You can see the recent release. I want to get the right number of how much it was. So it bought 4710, which it released obviously that message today. And the interesting thing about this is like, not like top ticking, but it's definitely not getting Bitcoin at a discount. Like, this is pretty damn high. So the guess would obviously have to be that it was being phased in over the last month or two. Is I think the way that logically would flow. So they really got in like pretty high. And I am pleased to see that they didn't over expose themselves with Bitcoin priced where it is right now. That actually makes me happy. And they've obviously given themselves a little bit of room to maneuver here, which I think is really, really important at this point. And a big part of that is to give them just a little bit more flexibility. I think by them having more flexibility with their positioning, it gives them just a better opportunity to take advantage of things as they're moving along. Jonathan says, does the document say exactly when? No, it doesn't say when. We could take a look at the statement itself. We'll see it in a little bit when they actually report. But GameStop Bitcoin investment, because right now everybody's trying to figure out how much they got it for. Let's see what this says. This says 513 mil. Well, it says it's worth 513 million, right? And that is a purposeful framing because they don't know what the actual basis is. So we'll see when earnings comes. Acquired 4710. Let me see what the filing is. Let's see. Bitcoin, GME, Bitcoin filing. Yep. There she goes. All of your questions answered in one spot. Yeah. So it says Hean says they spent under 513 mil, which is under 10%. Cash reserves could qualify for non-material amount. Well, we don't know what they spent, and it's just because it's like what this is saying is that it's worth this amount right now based on spot when this was written. This doesn't mean that they got it at or below this. It could have been above this actually during that most recent peak. Like, again, the way that I would generally speculate it is they probably built the position of 4710 likely over like a several week period versus just an outright bulk buy. But I think what they got, in my opinion, it represents a good amount, meaning not a good amount in that like it's a lot. I don't mean it that way. I mean a good amount in terms of like what this represents for GameStop getting pretty good exposure, but again, not overexposing it, and it gives them still more room to play. Now, again, the other thing is I'm not personally like super jazzed about them starting to load up on Bitcoin. I don't think it's bad. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but they still are a brick and mortar company. So they still need to do their job, and they still need to effectively continue doing what they're doing. So if I'm not mistaken, there was a recent release with recent interview. Let me see that I haven't seen yet. at the Bitcoin conference. All right. So for this one, I am going to keep the audio off because this one has a pretty high probability of killing us. And we'll just watch the closed captions. But we are going to have to go faster. Okay, innovative corporate strategies, pioneering from a dying business to thriving business. This is cool. Oh, this is, I'm going to play some of the audio because this just looks cool. I like what he's saying.
The company was a piece of crap and losing a lot of money. The company was under a lot of pressure, moving from physical games to digital downloads. So you had to cut costs. You had to cut costs very aggressively and bring in fiscal discipline.
I mean, that's like literally so pertinent. But let's see what he says. And we can speed this up more. Hopefully you guys can read fast because I can. Talks about the headwinds, company being under pressure, especially in the industry, need to cut costs. Why does it keep saying the same thing? Here we go. We had to move from physical games, digital downloads, costs under control, shift the business from being so reliant on games to collectibles. So that's actually a pretty big peak, by the way. The fact that they're talking about like a bigger emphasis on collectibles, because I think for a lot of us that actually seemed a little bit like a side quest, but this actually starts to make it look less like a side quest and way more like a primary primary focus for them, which I think is actually highly relevant. Big focus on trading cards, grading. The company is profitable in the US, gotten costs under control. Can I speed this up more? You can only go to 2 times? Damn, Daniel. I mean, so far, really nothing has been said, which is a little frustrating because this is like a really short interview. I would much prefer to see like much better qualitative input, because effectively it's that we had to change the business. These some of the things we did, which is good. Like those are good points, but it's just so rare to hear from him that I would love to get some substance. So hopefully. So now they're talking about the Bitcoin. So he's saying that they bought Bitcoin. He's saying that they own 4710. Here we go. Ah, smart. This is a great way. This is such a smart way to frame it, where he's essentially saying that he's not using it for direct speculation, but more for a hedge, which I actually like this. Talking about storage in direct comparison to gold, which is interesting. And then he goes into asymmetric upside. Here we go. So to no surprise, he essentially is saying we're not gonna say what we're doing ahead of time, as they typically don't. Okay, man, damn it. Just feel like we could have got some better stuff out of that. What a missed opportunity. Damn it. So the summary from that essentially confirms the presence of Bitcoin. It, to me, alludes to future purchase of Bitcoin likely, because I think in general, if they weren't going to buy more, likely would have said it, right? But they didn't. So my guess is that just gently alludes to the fact that they're probably going to buy more. I would have loved to know more about the broader integration strategy for Bitcoin, because he has effectively framed it in two things. He framed it as a currency hedge and compared it against gold. And then the second thing he talked about was potential asymmetric upside. But the way that you position for those two things and the way that you manage the holding is actually quite different. So I would have been like, that would have been a great follow-up if possible. But understanding limited time, and it is what it is. I'm sure the interviewer did what he could. But those are just some lingering questions I would have following that. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk really quick about with GameStop before I just go to the chat for Q&A is we did see them confirm their earnings. And funny enough, this is one of those names where we had a hint that something was off with respect to when earnings was thought to have been versus when it actually was. And we talked about it actually a while ago. And the options chain in terms of vol is pretty good at telling us where things are expected to be. So now we can see that the overall earning, or the options chain itself, has generally normalized at this point. So I think we can effectively just apply standard options trading and specifically earnings trading analysis. And as it gets closer, it's just too far out right now with it earnings at the 10th after the close. So it'll be in the 13 June cycle here. Cool. All right. So what do we got? Kian says, super curious about GameStop $4.5 million position. The holder of the 530-36 calls expiring in 2 days is still holding. Can you verify / have your thoughts? Yeah, let's take a look at it. There's a couple things that have to be noted, though, is, again, we don't know that that's one person. We really, and it's unfair to make the assumption that it is. Now, it's okay to, speculate, but it's a bit different, and it's important to recognize those differences. So this 30 May 36 calls. So the 36 calls, huge purchasing. Actually, this is the change in OI. So let's take a look. Yeah, so same thing there. And it looks like it's across a few strikes, because we can see that the 30s, the 30 May, also have the 41s going, the 40s, the 46s. So they actually have a pretty big position across these. And then the same thing with all the 30 Mays here, with people selling out or closing out of 39s, 32s, 33s, and 30s. So this looks like just a lot of playing the front expiration. And if you take a look at the volume for the front expiration cycle, the volume shows a pretty big downside, which is people closing stuff out. Current premium is at 23.3 mil. Let's take a look at I want to take a look at the expiration cycle. So 30 May. Let's take a look at those. Let's find those 36s. The fuck? Let's just go into the. I was curious if we could see any like sort of the larger trades coming through, but not so much. So let's go back into here and let's just go into the option chain itself. And let's take a look at. What is this thing? Tabs Alt. All right, let's find these 36. So OI is at 37,858. So the position got built here. And that's where that 4.16 is talking about. And it looks like there's been some sell-off. And some of this sell-off absolutely represents larger than what the buys look like. So some of these would be net outflows. And my guess here is that you'll probably see those come alive a little bit soon, because I mean, that's just the decent amount of money that's not looking great is what that boils down to. The 36s. So they would have got smashed today on that news. Literally trading for 25 cents at this point. Whereas the average fill here was at $1.02. So right now their trade is just looking, their trade is looking awful. They got absolutely smashed. Yeah, the ask side was 42,853. So just assuming most of that is one person, whatever it is, or whatever that entity is, they just got smashed. So yeah, that's a pretty big rollover for them, which sucks. Okay. Joseph. Hey, yo, what up, Joseph? Joseph says Musk on attention deficit and Mr. Market reaction to his CEO responsibility and that of his political attention. Yeah, that one's interesting because the market is very, very interested in how Elon is spending his time. I think that's actually more of a talking point than anything else. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Tesla itself is still broadly doing fine, right? Like on a longer term time frame, Tesla is still completely healthy here. So I think that's become a bit of a talking point actually to try and get people to be concerned about Elon and how he's spending his time, but he's always spent his time on a million different things. So people that try to make it as if like the stuff that he's spending in Doge is now directly coming out of just Tesla. I actually think that's a pretty big mistake because that time is going to be spent on a bunch of different things, right? He's in and runs a lot of different companies. So my guess more so is that it's something that's generally spread load. So yeah, I think it's more of a talking point than anything. The company itself still continues to do well, and I actually think the company is insanely well positioned longer term, especially for things like advanced robotics, probably being the first actual full self-driving car that's mainly adopted, that kind of stuff. And then the second from Joseph is GameStop Bitcoin, as well as SBET and ETH. That sentiment, gaming and digital assets. I don't follow that one. I don't follow that one. Lauren says, "Did you see the RC interview today?" Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So there we are. Joseph says also Kim, FFIE. Let's see. Or am I looking at the right thing? Are you referring to the REIT here? I mean, I assume this isn't it because this ain't got shit going on. Yeah, assume this is not the right thing. Let me try FFIE. FFIE has no options. I don't even know what this is. So not sure what both those are. Lauren says, can you take a look at Rocket Lab for sure? RKLB. Joseph says, I was just citing some dude. I have no idea who that is, but FFIE doesn't have an options chain, and that REIT has literally nothing going on. So yeah, I don't think, at least for the REIT that we were able to, KIM, there's nothing there. And then FFIE literally doesn't have options. Okay, back to Rocket Lab. Rocket Lab actually looks good with this break here. I like this. So this is kind of through the next larger volume node that it was able to crack through, which I mean that's solid. Like that's a solid break above that. So this generally looks like a pretty decent recovery rally. Well, at least what I would consider to be like a pretty decent recovery rally. Give me 1 sec. My robot is stuck. 1 sec, BRB. All right, we good. So yeah, this looks good. Let's take a look at the options chain and let's see what's been going on. All right, start here. I wish you could change the default on that. That would be way better. Shit. This looks like people that positioned pretty long calls, but then it looks like a bunch of those are getting sold off. It looks like this is actually a pretty short cycle. Looks like this has happened quite a few times, actually. So this is pretty heavy unwind, it looks like. Ricky says my robot is stuck. Oh, I have like a little robot vacuum. So it's doing the Lord's work right now of vacuuming stuff. Joseph says that dude is a legend. Gained 60 million on Forex. Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know anything about that dude. But yeah, I mean, like I said, those two names can object. Like the first name Kim literally has less than 6,000 total options, and then FFIE literally doesn't have options. So if there was a comment, something about that for FFIE with anything related to options, there are no options. So there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing there. They might have just misspoke or something. Maybe miswrote the ticker. Maybe you didn't read the right ticker or something. I don't know. But oh, Joseph says, Kim, keep in mind. Oh, so then you are talking about FFIE? What? I literally don't see options. Is it an error with the platform? No. Yeah, I'm confounded. Yeah, my guess is we're missing something here because like they're literally there's nothing. We got nada. All right, back to Raga Lab. Okay, so near term, we're seeing this cycle again of like buying calls, selling them, buying them, selling them. So that's playing the short-term price movement. I think that's pretty clear. Let's take a look at where we're seeing. Oh man, look at that. I mean, overall, pretty heavy call skew across strikes with one peak at the 7 puts. And from OI, pretty heavy upside bias, at least in terms of number of options. Let's take a look at premiums. Upside, 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 upside. Yeah. I mean, overall, it would be cool if there was a way to do like a composite total call versus put premium. Let me see if there's a thing for that in here, because that's effectively what I'm doing with my eyes there. Usual whales have a view where you can see the total call and put premium based on OI. Because you could do it by expiration cycles, but I wonder if there's a spot to do it all in one that I just don't know about. Net premium. Oh, that's cool. Where's that at? Show me where that's at. Where is net premium? Oh, is it talking on that main graph? That main graph that's not it. I don't see it there. Not there. Net flow. Ticker flow page. Is it interval flow? Net flow. Ah, here we go. This is great. Yeah, cool. This would be honestly really useful on that main page. They should do that. So let's see. Interesting. Not what I would have expected. I mean, those are like really heavy downside spikes. 1.3 and 254. That I wouldn't have expected that. That's a little more aggressive than I otherwise was seeing for KLB. Let's take a look at vol. Kind of flat to the upside. Kind of really flat to the upside. And then let's just take a look at deltas. 28. That's interesting. So there's a pretty decent amount of vol coming through on like the right out of the money calls, but it's still put skew with respect to vol, which we can see from that other. The difference that's interesting here is that the call implied vol is like very flat. I mean, there's just not much of a difference here. As it's not until you get like out pretty far that you start to see it, which is kind of interesting. So to me, it looks like there's some pretty big short positions, but in general, it looks like it's a little bit more bullish positioned. From like a technical perspective, it's like this is a good consolidation. This is a good breakout. This is a good breakout. So it does look like it's on a leg up. I mean, really the next place to beat, right, is all-time highs. Because it's already playing in this next volume node, and there's already clearly an appetite because volume is expanding. So the fact that there's a bit of sale volume today, that can be from a million different things, but there's definitely an appetite to transact here. So yeah, I mean, it looks like it's in the middle of a like pretty decent recovery rally. That's more or less what I see. Cool. All right, gang. As always, great catching up. I'll see you all in the Outlier community. You could join for free. See you around. Be an Outlier. See you guys later.